Hey everyone, good to see you here. This is Trish Regan Show. Welcome to the program. We've got all kinds of crazy stuff going on at the Pentagon these days. Hegseth's firing back as he tries to hang on to his job here, saying that you got all these leakers and they're doing all kinds of crazy things. Well, now some of those alleged leakers are actually coming forward, and it's getting a little bit stranger than fiction because they're like, no, we're not the ones leaking. No, this is actually some of the deep state folks that are trying to turn us all against each other. So, new wrinkle in this story, plus top 60 Minutes news producer out at CBS. Apparently, if you want to believe the New York Times, he quit. Maybe because of Trump. We'll get into all of that. Plus, Marco Rubio going nuclear on the State Department right now, slashing jobs every which way from here to Sunday. Basically, 700 D.C. positions are out, some 130 domestic bureaus that operated on behalf of the State Department are also going to be wiped out. It all comes as the Democrats double down on Garcia, right? Abrego Garcia, who's in El Salvador, and they just can't let this one go. They're all flocking down to El Salvador on taxpayer dimes. Incidentally, well, you know who knows that this is just a bad look? The California governor, one Gavin Newsom, who for whatever reason is trying to become, conservative as he gears up for a 2028 run. We're going to play some sound from him. And I'll tell you this, the Trump team is not happy about what we're getting out of the Supreme Court right now. There was a big ruling late on Friday that made it more difficult to be able to deport people believed to be part of the TDS gang back to their homeland of Venezuela. It all comes as the market recovers. Oh, we should rejoice. I mean, we'll see what happens tomorrow, right? Volatility's back. You name it. We've got you covered over there at 76 Research. Please make sure, if you haven't done that already, use code word dollar. It's my company. I started with a dear friend, 76research.com. Welcome. Good to have you here. I see a lot of familiar faces in the chat. We're live, so just be careful what you say. I see it all. Pentagon staffers accused of leaking here by one Pete Hegseth as we get report after report after report. It's like the media is just circling the wagons here. They smell blood. They're like sharks in the water. This is the latest and greatest out of NPR. So take that for what it's worth, right? Exclusive, they write. They got like one source. The White House is looking to replace Pete Hegseth as defense secretary. This came out yesterday, early evening. I don't know as I buy it, only because it is NPR, and I think it's wishful thinking on NPR's behalf, and also because the way this whole thing sort of went down. You had, first of all, the New York Times coming forward with their story about how he didn't just have one signal chat, he apparently had two signal chats. And all I would say is, heck, maybe there's 3 signal chats or 4 signal chats. I don't know, but it kind of feels like we've been there, done that, right? But they played it up, really big story in the New York Times on Sunday. And then you had none other than Politico come forward with this huge op-ed written by somebody who was the head of PR at the Pentagon, John Oliot, forgive me if I'm messing up his name. And he's saying, I love the guy, I love Pete, but he needs to understand that there's a lot of bad stuff going down, and he's probably not going to be able to stay in the gig. He writes, and again, he's a former chief Pentagon spokesperson and lead communications at the NSC, formerly in the Department of Veteran Affairs, during President Donald Trump's first term. He resigned from the Pentagon last week. He was the senior communications advisor on the Trump 2016 campaign. He wrote, "It's been a month of total chaos at the Pentagon, from leaks of sensitive operational plans to mass firings. The dysfunction is now a major distraction for the president, who deserves better from his senior leadership." Ooh, I get the sense already, right? Nobody likes each other over there. President Donald Trump has a strong record of holding his top officials to account, given that it's hard to see Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth remaining in his role for much longer. And so he goes, and then you look, he talks about Dan Caldwell, how he fired his 3 loyal senior staffers, including one advisor, Dan Caldwell, Deputy Chief of Staff, Darren Selnick, and also Colin Carroll, Chief of Staff to the Deputy Defense Secretary. In the aftermath, Defense Department officials working for Hegseth tried to smear the aides anonymously. 2 reporters claiming they were fired for leaking sensitive information as part of an investigative order that went down earlier in this month. Now, that was interesting to me, because, we alluded to some of those allegations. They were out there in the Daily Mail, et cetera. And there were these allegations that somehow these were the guys that were leaking, which is sort of wild, right? When your own team that's right around you, you can't even trust your chief of staff or your deputy chief of staff, that's not a very good thing. And so clearly, if that was going down, he needed to clean that up. But apparently, that's not really entirely what went down. So all these guys are sort of ganging up together, and they're saying, hey, this guy's got his thing out in Politico. I just temper this by the reality that Politico is the one that published that 51X spooks letter. Remember all the 51X spooks that had to tell you how Hunter Biden's laptop was not real, just misinformation fed to you courtesy of Rudy Giuliani and the Russians? Yeah, that Politico, the Politico that gets millions of dollars in USAID money and that maybe has a direct link into the Defense Department, that Politico is the one that chose to publish this piece by the guy who's no longer working there because, he thinks it's a giant SHIT show. Former top Pentagon spokesperson details month from hell, right? Anyway, there's definitely some liberal bias, shall we say, at NBR. There's definitely some liberal bias over there at the New York Times, and there's definitely some liberal bias at Politico. So I say you've got to take this all with a grain of salt, but I'll tell you what, Pete's not backing down. He's basically out there swinging, and he's complaining about these guys, saying, you know what, they're all leakers, and that's all they're ever going to do. Hear him just today, moments ago or earlier this morning on Fox.
When you dismiss people who you believe are leaking classified information, and again, the investigation is ongoing and that will take time, and when the evidence produced, it will go to DOJ, why would it surprise anybody, Brian, if those very same people keep leaking to the very same reporters whatever information they think they can have to try to sabotage the agenda of the president or the secretary? So once a leaker, always a leaker, often a leaker. And so we looked for leakers because we take it very seriously. And we will do the investigation. Right. And if those people are exonerated, fantastic. We don't think, based on what we understand, that it's going to be a good day for a number of those individuals because of what was found in the investigation. So if they want to keep leaking and pushing and peddling things that try to sabotage the president's agenda, that's unfortunate. But that's how leaking works in this town. We're focused on recruiting, on rooting out DEI, on securing our southwest border, on the president's agenda, and it's going very well at the Pentagon, and I'm proud of it.
Right. But in order to do all that, right, you got to get through the bureaucracy. And the question in who is part of this bureaucracy? Who's trying to take him down? I think in Pete's estimate, it's the very same people that are out there speaking, again, listening to him blast these media reports.
You remember when this all started, the first go-around, because this is the second go-around, right? They peddle old stuff, they kick it back up. I said repeatedly, no one's texting war plans. You know why I said that? Because I'm in the bowels of the Pentagon every single day. Just 10 minutes ago, I was looking at actual war plans of things that were ongoing or pending things to happen. Because that's on a regular basis on classified systems. That's my job for the war fighters, for the President of the United States. I look at war plans every single day. What was shared over Signal, then and now, however you characterize it, was informal, unclassified coordinations for media coordination and other things. That's what I've said from the beginning. At the beginning, it was left-wing reporters from The Atlantic who got a hold of it and then wanted to create a problem for the president. This is what it's all about, trying to get at President Trump and his agenda. Now, here at the Defense Department, because, Brian, I want this to be very clear, we take the classification of information very important. It's very significant to us that we safeguard it. And so when we had leaks, which we have had here, we did a serious leak investigation. And through that leak investigation, unfortunately, we found some folks that we believe were not holding to the protocols that we hold dear here at the Defense Department. Through that investigation, they have been moved on, and that investigation continues. As a result of that, everything we do here is above board, trying to make sure that we safeguard information. In this point, those folks who were leaking, who have been pushed out of the building, are now attempting to leak and sabotage the president's agenda and what we're doing. And that's unfortunate. It's not what I do. It's not how we operate. And so you've got another allegation being pushed again, not based on how we're operating around here. We're for the warfighters. We're for the president. And none of this is based in reality.
So he's got to get out there in front of this story, and that's exactly what he's trying to do. Thus far, he's gotten the support of the president, at least publicly. And I can tell you, on a personal level, The president likes Pete Hegseth a lot, and he's liked him for some time a lot. Pete has been a very loyal person to the president and the president's agenda, and so that's all fine and well. But what the heck is going on behind the scenes? Because on the one hand, you get Pete saying exactly what he said there on Fox, and then let's look at this new wrinkle in the story, a new wrinkle coming forward as Dan Caldwell speaks out. This is the guy that used to work for Pete, one of them. All the inner circle folks are getting fired. And this inner circle guy, Dan Caldwell, went on to Tucker's podcast, Tucker Carlson, who used to be at Fox, actually opposite me, 8 p.m. I was at the redheaded stepchild network on Fox Business, but a good time slot nonetheless. Anyway, Tucker had him on his podcast, and I want to play you a clip of this because Dan Caldwell is saying, look, I'm not the guy you want. Like, I'm a total distraction. I am not one of the people that is trying to take this whole thing down. Meanwhile, trust me, like, they didn't do anything that they should have done if they were really going to try and go after me. Let's look at Dan Caldwell here with Tucker. Tucker's like, man, they want you. Like, your head on a silver platter.
And I'm thinking, having spent my life in D.C., I was like, Dan Caldwell's got a target on his back that I don't know if he knows that.
Yeah.
And then I read all of a sudden that you're a traitor. You're like marched out of the Pentagon for leaking, right? And then the whispering campaign, the character assassination campaign begins, and here's its outline. I don't want to upset you. You may not even be aware of this. Dan Caldwell leaked classified information to liberal media outlets, to the media, to NBC News, for example.
I'm going to just pop in and say that's exactly what was being put out there, whether you want to call it a whisper campaign, whatever, but somebody was feeding that story because we were reporting on the allegations as they had been referenced in none other than Daily Mail. So someone was trying to do that. I've maintained all along, look, you deserve your own team. But the scary thing is this was his own team. Back to Tucker.
So I just want to be totally direct with you. Did you leak classified information against the wishes of your superiors to media outlets?
Absolutely not.
Did you photograph classified material and then text pictures of that material to an NBC News reporter?
Absolutely not. And I have not spoken to an NBC reporter while at the Pentagon.
The point is, you know what? I didn't do this. By the way, he goes on to say, if I did do these things, I'd be in a heck of a lot of trouble. I mean, think about the trouble you would be in because you're leaking classified information, sending it to this, that, and the other. You can't actually do that. He did say in this interview, and I encourage you to take a look at it, that perhaps the leaks were coming from the people that wanted to stand in the way of the agenda that is that of President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Secretary Hegseth, foreign policy. And that's his concern, right? Sometimes, he said, I feel like it hasn't fully set in because this all feels like a dream. It's like, when am I going to wake up? It's been awful. I mean, the impact on my family, it's been devastating, and it's caused a lot of stress to my family. I've been a friend and supporter of Pete Hegseth for a long time, and I'm just personally devastated by this. It's just awful and whatnot. But at the end of the day, putting all this aside, Pete Hegseth needs to be successful as Secretary of Defense, and the entire Department of Defense cannot continue to be consumed by chaos. But he's saying it is chaos that is really the problem there. Now, this doesn't bode well for Pete, let me just say, right? When you've got somebody who's like, I love the guy, I didn't deserve this, I didn't have anything to do with this, and the president deserves better. That's 2 people that have now come out. The first guy being the one I showed you in, well, you know, his bad choice of a publication going with Politico, but we won't totally hold it against him for now anyway. This is the guy that wrote the Politico op-ed, and he's saying the same thing, right? That it's total chaos, that it's been a month of total hell, and that President Trump is not going to be able to leave Pete in that job for that reason. But you got to go back to just exactly who's involved and what they're trying to do. I mean, if you were trying to root out the leakers, weren't you going to do all those things you said you were going to do? Apparently, according to Dan Caldwell, they didn't do any of them.
Sitting here right now, there are a lot of unknowns about this. As a former Secretary of Defense would say, there's a lot of unknowns. There are some things that are pretty clear, but we we have no idea what specifically we're being
So
investigated for.
we can know some things just by the details. So here are a couple. Have you been polygraphed?
No. I've never been hooked up to a polygraph machine since I've been in the Department of Defense.
Okay. Have you given up your private communications devices, your private phone, your phone?
No.
To anybody?
No.
Okay. So that raises the obvious question. I'm trying not to use the F word here because the lying is just driving me insane. You're being accused of leaking classified information, but the people accusing you would have no way of knowing whether you did that or not because they haven't polygraphed you or taken your devices, your private devices, correct?
I mean, there are...
You can't even make the allegation because there's no conceivable way you can prove that. Let me just say there's...
So,
but just back to your story, and I won't linger on it. Every time I mention this, your jaw tightens. I can feel your frustration. And I should just say point blank.
I'm frustrated at you.
Well, I'm completely convinced that this is nonsense and sinister nonsense. But if you were the subject of an investigation, a leak investigation, if the investigators had determined that you were leaking classified information to the news media, you probably wouldn't have continued to receive access to classified information, correct?
Correct, and I probably would be sitting here today.
You'd be in jail, dude. You would have been handcuffed, correct?
No, he's totally right. I mean, so that gets us back to just exactly what is going down. Why would Pete Hegseth be firing the closest people around him unless, like, they've really gaslit him? And I think that that's a little bit of a warning. What Tucker and Dan Caldwell are communicating to the public there, that's a little bit of a warning. In other words, if these are the people that are closest to Pete and he's getting rid of them because they're trying to pursue an agenda that he likewise wanted to pursue on behalf of the President of the United States, and they're somehow the problem. And they're gaslighting Pete to say, you got to get rid of these people. And then Pete's out there saying, oh, you know, the leakers are the problem. And when they go on TV and when they go on podcasts and when they write articles in Politico, they are still the problem. The question becomes, does Pete entirely know? I mean, these are intel ops, for goodness sakes, we're dealing with, right? Like, they might be the masterminds of sorts. I'm tempted, dare I say, to believe my inner circle. I'd like to believe that the people I have hired and that I'm working with that allegedly purport to value the same things I do, that the president does, I'd like to believe them first, but for whatever reason, they're the first ones getting fired.
When you dismiss people who you believe are leaking classified information, and again, the investigation is ongoing and that will take time, and when the evidence produced, it will go to DOJ, why would it surprise anybody, Brian, if those very same people keep leaking to the very same reporters whatever information they think they can have to try to sabotage the agenda of the president or the secretary? So
okay, so he's convinced, it sounds like to me, that these guys were actually the problem. These guys, on the other hand, are saying, no, we're not the problem. There's kind of a deep state neocon problem going on, and it's people that really have a lot of money at stake, and they want things to go the way they've always gone, and so they got to get rid of people they believe that are close to Pete, trying to push for the president's agenda. And Pete may not know that yet. I don't know. I don't know what he knows. I think that he's kind of rightly so a little concerned. Wouldn't you be? You get the Democrats taking aim. I mean, they're having a freaking field day at this, you guys. Again, sharks in the water. Here's CNN. They're already picking out replacements for poor Pete Hegseth.
Is early, and Hegseth will be speaking shortly, so we will hear more, and that could mean even more fallout. Then there's the issue, Mark, of if not Hegseth, who would run the Pentagon? During his whole confirmation battle, the name of Governor Ron DeSantis from Florida was floated. Not so sure that would happen now.
No, I don't think that would happen now either. You know, as much as Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump have made up publicly, there is a little bit of friction there between both camps. Two people to look at, though. Tom Cotton, the senator from Arkansas right there, and as well as Chris Miller. He is the former Secretary of Defense who Donald Trump had him in that position. Let me just tell you why Cotton might take it. Because he might have to take it. He might be forced into doing it because he believes that's his best path towards the presidency. On the other hand, he is number 3 in the Senate Republican Conference. He's in a very good position. He may think that his better shot at running for president is from the U.S. Senate. Now, the other side is Chris Miller, is somebody who was very loyal to President Trump, and then during the investigation of January 6th was critical of Donald Trump. He has since come out and then said that he takes back his criticism of Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has actually mentioned Miller as a possible defense secretary. He did that about 17 months ago, so Miller might be at the top of the list.
Well, maybe watching this very closely very soon. We'll see. Mark Preston, great to see you this morning. Thank you.
Okay,
very
Christopher
much.
Miller, not terribly familiar with him. We obviously know Tom Cotton quite well. No one is going to really have a great sort of red carpet rollout, shall we just say, if you come in and you replace Pete Hegseth, because Pete Hegseth is definitely a favorite with not just the president, but with the base. Look, I've known Pete for years. He's a smart guy. He has got all the educational credentials back when, education actually mattered. And he is a smart guy. He worked on Wall Street before ever going and becoming a Marine, and went into armed services, and the rest is history. Eventually got out and worked at Fox, etc. But he's got a lot of support, including from the most important guy in the room, okay, ladies and gentlemen, and that would be the President of the United States. Here's Caroline Leavitt really making the case, just as the president wants her to, on Fox and Friends yesterday morning.
The president stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth, who is doing a phenomenal job leading the Pentagon. And this is what happens when the entire Pentagon is working against you and working against the monumental change that you are trying to implement. Secretary Hegseth was nominated for this position because he is standing up for the war fighter, the men and women in uniform who are putting their lives on the line to protect our country and our homeland. And unfortunately, there have been people at that building who don't like the change the secretary is trying to bring, so they are leaking and they are lying to the mainstream media. We've seen this game played before. The secretary is doing a tremendous job, and the president stands strongly behind him.
Look, I think she's spot on. He's there until he's not, but right now, Donald Trump supports Pete Hegseth. We'll see if anything changes. I think it definitely convolutes things when you get so many different views out there. And, Tucker's obviously quite a favorite with the base, and somebody that the president likes as well. So it certainly complicates the situation. But I think what's certainly clear is that you got yourself a good old-fashioned mess. But you knew this would happen, guys. You knew it would happen. Why? Because there's a lot of money at stake, and they smell vulnerability because Pete is new, and Pete doesn't play by the same kind of rules, and Pete's shaking things up in ways that they didn't anticipate. I mean, Marco's doing the same thing, but he comes with a little bit more, shall we say, in the way of sharp elbows, right? He's been in D.C. a long time. He knows how these games are played, and so he's going out, and he's now remaking the entire State Department, all as this goes down with defense. And I suspect there are people that really have a target on Pete's back, and they may have had targets all around all the people associated with him, which is why Dan Caldwell is saying what he's saying to Tucker. In other words, these two things, they can both be true. Caldwell maybe didn't say anything to any reporter ever. And there are other people that are suggesting these leaks happen, perhaps even in the ear of Pete Hegseth. So I think there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen on this one. We're going to see how this all shakes out. We want it to all calm down, right? It's got to calm down for the sake of everyone. But the Democrats are trying to use it, right? They're trying to use it, which is why they tweeted out yesterday, and he had a good retort to them. I'll tell you, at least he gets the media business, right? You can't mess with Pete on that. He knows exactly how to respond to these schmoes. At Pete Hegseth needs to go, to which he said, your agenda is illegals, trans, and DEI, all of which are no longer allowed at DOD. Exactly. These guys are unbelievable. The blood in the water, they love it. We do have a market turnaround today, which I'm a bit excited about, but is gold still going up? I think it probably is. I'm just blown away by gold prices, ladies and gentlemen. I've always told you I liked it. You know what? It's actually down a tad today. That reminds me I got to buy a little bit more. And when I buy gold, one of the best places to do that would be with my friends at American Hartford Gold. You can get up to $15,000 right now in free silver when you go to American Hartford Gold. Just text Trish to 65532. Again, 65532, or call them at 1-844-495-1115. And how can I forget? We're fully independent, so we love our sponsors here on the Trish Regan Show. And we love Hey, who doesn't love your sponsors when your sponsors are making people money, right? Trish loves gold. Go check that out. You can sign up for the offer for the $15,000 in free silver, or just use my name when you call them or text them. Text Trish, Trish, to 65532. Well, how do you like that for the sign? The other thing you got to do, and this is my gift to you because volatility is the name of the game right now. 76 Research, my company, I started it. This is not an ad, folks. This is not an ad. This is, it's of course, we do actually love gold at 76 Research too, because Trish loves gold, right? Anyway, 76 Research, I am very happy to see the market up and turned around. I did say, and we put out a note early this morning that we had drafted last night. Look, you got to stay the course in times like this. What did I do yesterday? I added to my triple Qs. I have an index that's just Mag 7. I added to my portfolios. We have 3 portfolios actually at 76 Research, and you can get those names at 76portfolios.com. 10 to 15 stocks in each one of those portfolios. So well worth you knowing, especially as things are kind of dicey right now. All right, so Pete has been picking on the media, which I get, right? Well, the media now has a little story of its own. Top producer over at CBS News that produced 60 Minutes, past tense, he is out. He is leaving the network after years and years and years. He's quitting, allegedly, per the New York Times, because he says he has lost his independence. The news program has faced mounting pressure, writes the New York Times, from both President Trump and its corporate ownership at Paramount, the parent company of CBS News. Well, a lot of pressure in part because, they did things like this. Remember the 60 Minutes clip where they kind of, unfortunately for them, clued us into what was going on because they ran a little part of the interview that they had done with Kamala Harris, and they ran it on Face the Nation in the morning, on Sunday morning on that show, and then by Sunday night, we got a very different clip. Oh, because you see they have mountains and mountains of tape, and they only showed a certain, they cleaned it up. They cleaned it up, even though they later released a transcript in the original interview, etc. Anyway, this made the rounds on social media. This was very popular, effectively a meme that people watched over and over again. Didn't make the president very happy because he accused them of trying to interfere with the election by trying to make Kamala Harris look like she actually knew what was going on in the world instead of, I would say the reality of the fact that she didn't. He would say that too. Maybe 60 Minutes thought she did, and they just needed to put better words in her mouth. Here we go.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We are not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
Gosh, it was so nice and tight on the last round, right? She did such a nice little answer there, just to button up. Well, the producer who's in charge of the entire program, this is like the flagship program for CBS News. I used to work there. I know this is sort of where every reporter wants to go, except that, once you go there, nobody actually sees you anymore. Really and truly. I mean, when can you name? Do you know even who that reporter was that did that interview? Probably not. I happen to know him because I worked at CBS News. But nobody knows these people because none of this really, in the scheme of things, is relevant anymore. For goodness sakes, by the time they get to it on Sunday night, good luck. And then they chop it up and they re-edit it, and somehow you get some other version of the quote-unquote truth. And you know what? People don't like that anymore. They like the spontaneity of stuff like this. They like the spontaneity of no teleprompter. Graphics that may go a little crooked now and then. It's real, baby, right? It's real. So anyway, the 60 Minutes guy, Bill Owens is his name. He is leaving. I will say this for him. You know what? In fairness, and this is allegedly in part because, the owners wanted him to do something kind of funky. The majority shareholder, Redstone, wanted him to kind of make nice with Trump and maybe issue an apology because there's that $10 billion lawsuit that Trump has thrown at them. I will give him this. At least he had the good sense to quit as opposed to doing, say, like what a Georgie boy did over at ABC News, Disney. Georgie boy just said, well, I'm going to stay on and I'm going to pout, but I'm going to continue to collect my millions of dollars. I'm just going to pout. And maybe at the end of my contract, I'll leave. But this guy, Bill Owens, said, you know what? I'm out of here. I don't agree with it, therefore, and I got to give him that. You know what? That's the right thing to do. If you don't agree with the editorial direction, if you don't agree with what your bosses are trying to ask you to do, this actually has nothing, in my estimation, to do with Trump and sort of just a look at who you are. And in a new transparent world where we all are, what you see is what you get, well, then good. You know what? If you hate Trump and you don't think that he deserves an apology, even though your boss is like, oh, but I got to get this deal with Skydance and Paramount done. They're trying to sell, right? They need to get this merger and they need to get the FCC on board. And it's entirely possible that, they're not going to, they got to settle this Trump. I mean, that's not, and I hope that's not the case because you hope that there's not that kind of conflict of interest going on. But I wouldn't be surprised if somebody took him aside and said, hey, it might be nice if you just told the president you're sorry. And he's like, no, I can't do that. And, fine. Okay, then go do your own little thing. Maybe you can produce a podcast. If you're really lucky, maybe you can even produce Rachel Maddow's podcast. I don't know. I don't care. But I admire you for saying I'm not going to stand by and let my bosses dictate everything. And guess what? Good news about nowadays is you don't have to. Oh, they want to get that merger going, great. They can go do it without you. And that's actually a good thing, a refreshing thing about this environment, this new environment in which we all live, where I think there's more power to the individual to kind of say exactly what they think. Just to give you a little bit more color here, as we look, Sherry Redstone apparently is very eager to secure the Trump administration's approval for a multi-billion-dollar sale of her company to Skydance, a company run by the son of tech billionaire Larry Ellison. She has expressed a desire to settle Mr. Trump's case, which stems from what the president has called a deceptively edited interview, what I just showed you, in October with Vice President Kamala Harris that aired on 60 Minutes. But what is believed to have been part of that settlement would have been some kind of acknowledgement from the show that they screwed up. And apparently he's just not willing to do that. Okay, if we go back to the article here in the New York Times, we see the Michael Girnbaum, who reports on media and politics, lucky him, writes that CBS News has entered a new period of turmoil. On Tuesday, after the executive producer of 60 Minutes, Bill Owens, said that he will resign from the long-running Sunday news program because he had lost his journalistic independence. In an extraordinary declaration, Mr. Owens, only the third person to run the program in its 57-year history, told his staff in a memo that, quote, over the past months, it has become clear that I would not be able to run the show as I have always run it, to make independent decisions based on what was right for 60 Minutes, right for the audience. So having defended this show and what we stand for from every angle over time with everything I could, well, very dramatic, I am stepping aside so the show can move forward. Interesting. It's like the New York Times just loves it, right? Because now they can say, oh, Trump made the 60 Minutes producer this, total Tiffany Network, stellar thing, like quit. To which I say, okay, you know what? It's a free country. You want to quit. You got more, I won't say the word, than one Georgie Pie over at ABC News who just threatens to quit and mopes around and is all upset because he had to, cough up, well, his network had to cough up $16 million to Donald Trump, $1 million going to the lawyers, another $15 million going to the library, to the Trump library, because you decided to defame him over and over and over again. Even though your producers told you, don't do it, he decided to do it on the air. Okay, so now another one bites the dust. You know what? The news is being remade. And I'm going to tell you this, guys. You know what's great about it all? because I've worked at 60 Minutes, including with this gentleman who's a perfectly nice person, nothing against him. Again, I give him credit for actually stepping down if he doesn't believe in what they're trying to do, regardless of politics, right? But what's great about this new sort of era is that you can be whoever you want to be, and you can do it on your own, and you don't have to kowtow to the corporations that are telling you to do this, that, or the other. I mean, this is the beauty of information now. And so it's a good thing, it's a positive thing, and I'm here because of it. Really, and I mean that as someone who's been there on the inside, and I see how the sausage is made. You're lucky to get a minute 20, you get $1.10, right? Minute 10 to do your little story on GDP. I picked GDP because, I'm primarily a business reporter, right? So you do a little story on GDP, and then you get 10 seconds at the very end with someone like the producer like this saying, you 10 seconds, God help you if you go to 11 or 12, because everything is so tightly wound and so tightly scripted. And that's why these evening news shows or these big budget magazine shows actually don't have a place in media today, because by the time they get to it, everybody's already seen it. And what really matters, I think, is the transparency of your opinion. So if you have a viewpoint, and hopefully, for goodness sakes, you do, because I don't want to hear you. Why would I bother listening to you if you don't have a viewpoint, for goodness sakes? Disclose it. Let me know what your viewpoint is. I let you know what mine is. A lot, every day, nonstop, right? Make sure you subscribe. I'll tell you who's letting us know their viewpoint. The Trump team is livid over what went down with the Supreme Court of the United States of America on Friday. Taking a look at this right here. Look at this. On Friday, we got word of the urgent order protecting Venezuelan migrants that are part of a known TDS gang. They were going to be shipped back to Venezuela, but nope. Apparently, the Supreme Court intervened and said you can't do it, even though they had already said you're totally fine to be able to use this Aliens Enemy Act of 1798. Well, Stephen Miller's not one bit happy about this. This is the guy who's the policy chief there, domestic policy chief at the White House. And he's always good for some fireworks. I want to show you his clip on Newsmax. Just, was this morning or yesterday? Here we go.
You have, in this case, illegal aliens from Venezuela sent here by Maduro, who are members of a foreign terrorist organization, Tren de Aragua, an organization that the intelligence community has found is operating at the direction of a hostile, adversarial foreign regime carrying out criminal enterprises to destabilize the political system in the United States. Those are the facts when it comes to TDA. So they're all illegal, they're all gang members, they're all foreign terrorists. And now we are being told that they cannot be expelled from our country without an extraordinary amount of individualized adjudication at the district court, circuit court, Supreme Court, up and down, up and down, up and down. No American citizen receives this level of so-called due process. Because it isn't due process. This is called infinity process to keep you here forever. Yeah. That's what this is.
Oh no, it's crazy.
No American citizen charged with a crime, with a serious crime inside the United States, a U.S.-born American citizen receives this kind of process. Millions of dollars in free legal services, representation at every single level. I mean, do you think that there is any, for example, any American citizen who was persecuted, who was innocent related to January 6th? Do you think they could just get this kind of relief, this kind of process? No. It was never available to them. Yeah. The whole system was rigged against them, just like it's rigged in favor of illegal alien invaders.
He's not wrong on this. Think about what happened with the J6. I mean, you had like grandmothers, right, waiting for their chance at some kind of fairness. And yet Venezuelan migrants are not going to be deported because the view is, well, they need this due process. I'm sorry, but you kind of had me on Venezuelan migrants. I mean, look, don't get me wrong, it's not fair to accuse somebody of a crime, right? Everybody deserves the same due process. I think Miller's making a good point that we're not even guaranteeing Americans that same kind of due process. But when you're here illegally from another country and you are believed to be a member of a gang, you probably should be sent out, because you probably could be deported just on the fact that you are here illegally. Dare I say this? Here's Mike Davis. He's one of the former attorneys for the president, and he spoke with Steve Bannon this morning. He's just furious about this. He thinks the Supreme Court really, really messed up. It's just a temporary order, of course, but he doesn't like the sound of it. I want to play it for you. It's a little technical, so bear with me.
This is a very disappointing ruling by the Supreme Court. Now, remember, it's just a temporary order saying that the government can't ship out these Tren de Aragua and MS-13 terrorists until the court further rules. But I don't know how the court even thinks it had jurisdiction to do what it did late on Friday night, on Good Friday. You had these ACLU plaintiffs who essentially put a self-imposed deadline on the district court in Texas, giving the district court 45 minutes on Friday to rule. And then the ACLU moved forward with an appeal to the Fifth Circuit, which divests the district court of jurisdiction. And then the Fifth Circuit has indicated it was getting ready to rule on this matter. And then the Supreme Court used the emergency docket impermissibly. They didn't have jurisdiction to issue this stay under the All Writs Act. I mean, Justice Alito's opinion is spot on, that the opinion that Justice Thomas joined, to me, it is a total head scratcher that the three Trump justices who made many assurances to the Trump administration that they're going to be constitutionalist and originalist and they're going to follow the law, I don't think they did that on Good Friday. I don't think they did that when they failed to join this opinion. So you have to ask why. Why was there such lawlessness and cowardice by the Supreme Court? And this is a very important question, because this goes to the heart of the Supreme Court's legitimacy. President Trump campaigned on the fact that he is going to secure our border and he's going to deport illegal immigrants. They are all criminals, right? He's going to especially focus on Tren de Aragua, foreign terrorists, and MS-13 gangbangers. And President Trump is doing exactly what he promised American voters he can do, and he's following the law. It's these lawless judges on the district courts and now the lawless judges on the Supreme Court who are just making up the law as they're going. They're essentially becoming judicial activists, telling the president that he has to halt planes. How long are they going to hobble the president in his ability to get these foreign terrorists the hell out of our country? What process is due? And why are we so concerned about Tren de Aragua terrorists? Why can't they file habeas petitions? So here's the bottom line. This is what President Trump needs to do. He needs to round up all these illegal immigrants. He needs to detain them in Texas or Guantanamo or wherever he wants to detain them. And then they can sit in that holding pen until the Supreme Court figures out what due process is due to these people.
Now, I'm sure there are some people that are going to say that is just awful and that is terrible and that is mean and you should not actually ever do anything quite like that. But what Mike Davis is talking about is enforcing the border, right? Really simply just enforcing the border, because whether somebody is part of Tren de Aragua or whether somebody is MS-13 or whether somebody is just believed to be in here illegally, you're running certain risks. I would say on the plus side, we've just learned that ICE has arrested an alien who was wanted on terror charges out of India. Let me play this for you because this is important. I mean, this is kind of, what we're trying to do here, even though everybody keeps on forgetting about what the motive and goal. I realize feelings are in the way.
So ICE arresting an illegal alien wanted in India for terrorism-related charges. He was released into the U.S. under President Biden. His name is Harpreet Singh, one of India's most wanted fugitives. He was caught illegally crossing the border 3 years ago in Arizona, allowed to enter the interior of the country. He's wanted in connection with a series of deadly terror attacks in India. ICE agents took him into custody about a week ago in Sacramento, California.
So that's kind of a big deal. right? Like, so this is an alleged terrorist suspect. ICE is finally this is what this is about, even though people keep seemingly forgetting that we want to make sure that we're securing our country and we are securing our borders. So when the Supreme Court comes and says, you know what, you can't use this, that, and the other, the laws that theoretically should be on the books to be able to help us, you can understand this becomes increasingly a problem. Where it goes from here, I don't necessarily know. I'm going to tell you guys that because I'm looking at the 1798 thing and I'm like, well, you said that was okay, that stood. And that actually gave Donald Trump a reason to be deporting those people to El Salvador. And now you're standing in the way in this emergency hour to protect this group of Venezuelans that are here illegally. And I think it leaves people with a lot of questions, not to mention sort of whose side are you on, right? Whose side are you on? Think about that for a minute.
You have, in this case, illegal aliens from Venezuela sent here by Maduro who are members of a foreign terrorist organization, Tren de Aragua, an organization that the intelligence community has found is operating at the direction of a hostile adversarial foreign regime carrying out.
So again, I don't really, if you're assuming that you've got that flexibility via the Alien Act of 1798, then why wouldn't you be able to remove people you are deeming a threat? I think it's and it'll get resolved. As we said, the Supreme Court was temporary, and incidentally, that was two. You had Thomas, for example, and I believe it was Alito, siding with the president and the administration on this one. In the meantime, you get Senator Van Hollen, who's out there and somehow, after running down to El Salvador to have his coffee and water, although Bukele kept saying it was margaritas and posted a terrific doctored picture. You got to take everything with a grain of salt. Literally, when I saw the salt on the rings of the glass, I said to one of our team members, I'm like, I think he had a little fun with those. Anyway, Chris Van Hollen has seemingly totally forgotten that this guy that you see in the picture is actually Garcia from El Salvador, because I played this for you yesterday. I want to show you again. Look at what he says when he's talking about him in passing to little Georgie on This Week. Stephanopoulos, the guy who wouldn't resign when his network had to pay $16 million to Donald Trump. He really ought to if he's that upset. Anyway, I digress. Here is Chris Van Hollen with Georgie.
I think at some point, the president of El Salvador realized it was looking really bad to have this person who had been absconded from America, from the streets of Maryland, in one of their prisons.
You heard it, right? I heard it. This person from Maryland. Okay. Make up your mind. I mean, he's got a terrible rap sheet. The president has talked about this,
He's a fake. I know him. I know them all. They're all fake. And they have no interest.
Actually, in that particular case, he was just talking about Chris Van Hollen. Chris Van Hollen is the fake.
He's a fake. I know him. I know them all. They're all fake. And they have no interest in that prisoner. That prisoner's record is unbelievably bad. They talk about how evil I am, that this man would be thrown out of our country. This man is according to certified statements that we get, is a very violent person. And they want this man to be brought back into our country where he can be free and to stay as a happily Maryland, they call him the Maryland man. He's a Maryland father. No, this is a violent person.
So that's Trump saying he's a violent person. According to the DOJ, the DOJ did come out and say, look, the wife had requested protection because she was concerned for her safety. Pam Bondi has said, look, the country's safer, and most importantly, the wife and the child are safer because Garcia is in El Salvador. Garcia's wife was asked about this, and I couldn't believe this. I'm going to show you again because ABC, it's like nobody has any ethics there. I go back to the CBS News thing. Like, I don't like them, but at least the guy had the decency to resign and quit and say, I'm out of here, right? Go back to ABC where they're afraid to ask any kind of real question. In this case, you get the GMA anchor, who's a former athlete, I guess, asking the wife, Garcia's wife, hey, they're saying that you filed for protection because you were concerned. You needed police to help you against this potential violence for your husband. And can you talk about that? Silence, crickets. She just totally stonewalled and wouldn't even talk about it or address it.
I have to ask it. You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
Hello?
My husband is alive. That's all I can say.
That's it.
Okay. And I'm not going to push on that, apparently.
No.
But how much hope?
Not going to push on that because I'm not any kind of journalist. This is ABC Disney News, right? Oh my gosh. Quick shout out for our wonderful sponsor of this program, Balance of Nature, balanceofnature.com. Go check that out, guys. If you want to take your vitamins every day, like I take mine, which I'm so thankful they send me these because I actually do take them. And my vitamin D level, thank you very much, is now in good territory. I can't say it always has been. It's an important vitamin. I mean, you get everything actually with the fruits and veggies, which is what I take. You get everything in there. But in my particular case, it was really critical that I upped the vitamin D level because I live in the Northeast. Even in the summer, I'm actually not outside enough. I hope to do more of that this summer, but I need to get that vitamin D somehow, some way. And thanks to these guys, I'm getting it. I encourage you to go to balanceofnature.com. You get 35% off if you use code word Trish. You're helping the show, you're helping yourself, you're helping everyone. Win, win, win. And you get not only the 35% off, you get the free shipping, and you get your money back guarantee. So definitely go check out balanceofnature.com today. They've got thousands of testimonials. They make so many of these, and so many people all over the world actually have benefited from it, and they have told Balance of Nature they've benefited from it. So you can read not just my story, but everybody else's. Go to balanceofnature.com and use my code word Trish, Trish. You know how to spell it, right? 4 Democrats going down to El Salvador because they think that this is the latest and greatest, new thing to do, I guess. Traveling to El Salvador on taxpayer dimes. Like, let's not kid ourselves. You know who's paying for that? You, me, federal taxpayer dollars. We'll see if Comer can stop it, but they're all traveling down there and they're putting it through on the expense account. So they're like, yeah, we went down there. This is Representative Garcia, no relation, of course, to the Garcia that's in incarceration there. Not in the actual scary prison, but in another prison there in El Salvador. They moved him right away. Anyway, let's see what they have to say. Talking to CNN, you got the California governor who's going, oh, no. Like, this is just bad for the Democrat Party. Yeah, you bet it is.
Congressman Garcia, what have you been able to learn about Abrego Garcia as far as his whereabouts and his well-being for that matter?
Right. Well, first, we obviously went there to ensure that he continues to be safe, that he continues to get access to counsel. We know that now that through the courts, at least the El Salvadorian government says that he is alive still. We hadn't heard that since Senator Van Hollen's visit. But this continues to be a very, very serious issue for him, his family, and the country. This case represents a Trump defying a 9-0 decision of the Supreme Court. But we also advocated directly to the U.S. ambassador there on the ground. It's clear from our meetings with him and others that the U.S. Embassy has received no direction to begin any sort of facilitation as directed by the Supreme Court, which is incredibly concerning. And at the same time, we, of course, met with Abrego Garcia's family and, most importantly, human rights activists and advocates that are on the ground advocating in El Salvador, not just for Kilmer Garcia's release, but also to ensure that due process is in place for other folks that are down there. We advocated, for example, for Andrea Romero, who's a young Venezuelan asylum seeker that had been granted asylum process, a young gay man who is now imprisoned with no access, and we have no idea his condition. And so the visit was incredibly important, eye-opening, and we'll continue to push and keep the pressure on.
And we'll keep the pressure on. And boy, am I happy I heard that. Sorry, guys. I thought it was going to be a little bit more exciting. But, you see the 4 of them like lumps on a log saying, okay, we went down there, here we're doing the right thing. One of them from Washington, I think, put out a little TikTok video. I won't bore you with it. But the point is they're out there trying to defend this guy who's alleged to be part of MS-13. And I got to say, it's not really a good look, right? It's not a good look, especially when you consider who's paying for it. Here's the answer. Thank you very much.
Who did pay for this trip?
This was an officially cleared, congressional trip, cleared
So
on a
taxpayer
bipartisan
dollars.
basis. Yes, like every other trip.
Yeah, like every other trip we go on, taxpayer dollars are paying for it. Not if Comer has anything to do with it. He's like, no. You were requesting money for this thing. I want you to know that I am not going to approve it because this is not the right thing to do. And then he goes on to say, you're down there seeing these alleged gang members, and that's really not a great look. Because what about the US of A? What about the people that are here? Why didn't you do anything during all those years? You had every opportunity to do something. Let's be very clear. There was no giant border bill. Donald Trump didn't gain money to go after the border. And then, but yet you have a 96% decline in the number of border crossings. What's that about? It's called enforcement, guys, all right? It's not that hard. Gavin Newsom knows this is a bad look. This is not a winning issue for Democrats. All the polling shows this. This is why Donald Trump was elected, and yet they're doubling down on this stuff. I don't think it's going to work, and nor does Gavin.
This is the distraction of the day. The art of distraction. It's a tough case because people are they defending MS-13? Are they defending, someone who's out of sight, out of mind in El Salvador? It's exactly the debate they want because they don't want this debate on the terrorists. They don't want to be accountable to the markets today. They want to have this conversation. Don't get distracted by distractions.
Okay. We won't. We're going to get back to the markets, which are doing great today, by the way. Honestly, it is not a good look. Meanwhile, you've got Van Hollen, who can't even tell you that he had the decency to ask about the question that is the elephant in the room. He went all the way down to El Salvador. And even CNN's like, well, did you ask the guy if he's innocent or not? And he's like, no, because I knew his answer. No, because it doesn't matter to you. You don't care. He may be a member of MS-13. I'm not going to make judgment, okay? I know what the court decided. I know that a judge would not actually even allow him out on bail because they said he was a member of this notorious gang. But he wants to dispute it. His wife wants to dispute it. His lawyer wants to dispute it. Okay, you're Chris Van Hollen. You're the senator from Maryland. You don't have the decency to ask him whether there's any truth to any of that? No, because you don't care. And that's what's so disgusting and sad. Watch.
President Trump says that some of Abrego Garcia's tattoos signify that he's a member of MS-13. In 2019, police alleged a confidential informant claimed that Abrego Garcia was an active MS-13 member. His wife and his attorney deny that, of course. Can you say with absolute certainty that he is not, nor has he ever been a member of the MS-13 gang? And did you ask him point blank?
Well, Dana, what Donald Trump is trying to do here is change the subject. The subject at hand is that he and his administration are defying a court order to give Abrego Garcia his due process rights. They are trying to litigate on social media what they should be doing in the courts. They need to put up or shut up in the courts. Let me tell you, and I decided to write this down so I could be absolutely accurate as to what Federal District Court Judge Zinnes said about these allegations by the Trump administration. Quote, "No evidence linking Abrego Garcia to MS-13 or any terrorist activity has been presented to the court." That's where to litigate this. It's been litigated in many other places. So I'm not going to get into the details because the whole purpose of our court system is for them to adjudicate these things, not for Donald Trump to go off on social media.
Yeah, you're right. They have not, there hasn't been a court hearing for them to put forward evidence in the first place, which is your whole point. But since you were the one person to have met with him, and since this is a thing, you say on social media, it's what we hear from Donald Trump and Republicans every day, all day long, you didn't ask him?
I didn't ask him that because I know what his answer is.
You get it? He doesn't care. He's like, oh, he's going to say, no, you should have at least asked him. Like, don't you care? Don't you want to know the truth? Caroline Levitt says this is the truth.
He is an illegal alien, a foreign terrorist,
and a criminal MS-13 gang member who violated our country's laws by coming here in the first place. And shame on Senator Chris Van Hollen and the entire Democrat Party, who wasted Easter Sunday going on every television show in the country to advocate for the return of an illegal criminal gang member.
Yeah. All right. So that's where we stand. For some reason, you guys just are so smitten with wokeness that you've forgotten. And by the way, this is exactly why you lost. It's exactly why you lost. This is what people wanted fixed. You're so smitten with wokeness that you're willing to spend all kinds of crazy money that is not even yours. It's taxpayer dollars to go down to El Salvador to fight for this, when I think everybody's looking at you saying, hey, this is not the hill that you want to die on. Caroline Levitt, I stand corrected, saying, I guess border crossings are down 99.9%. I said 96% earlier in the program. Here she is just moments ago.
At the border, President Trump continues to deliver on his promise to make America safe again. The Wall Street Journal captured the Trump effect in a recent article. Border crossings grind to a halt as Trump's tough policies take hold. U.S. Customs and Border Protection recorded its lowest southwest border crossings in history in March, and we're seeing the same successes at our northern border. Here's how the New York Post put it. Northern border sector previously overrun by illegal migrants sees dramatic drop in crossings. We haven't seen anyone since November, end quote. According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, just 54 illegal aliens were apprehended in the Swanton sector of our northern border, which stretches more than 300 miles in March. This is a drastic 95% drop from the more than 1,000 border crossings that were caught in March 2024. This is a main hotspot area that recorded more than 80% of all apprehensions along the northern border during the 2024 fiscal year. And new reporting from the Washington Times fully highlights the difference in Joe Biden's disgraceful approach to the border compared to President Trump's. Under Trump, border catch and release has dropped 99.99% from worst Biden month. You can't get much better than that. This statistic in particular is astounding. Border Patrol agents caught and immediately released 189,604 illegal aliens into the United States in December 2023 at the height of the Biden border crisis. But under President Trump, Border Patrol agents caught and released only 20 illegal aliens into the U.S. in the month of February. Thanks to President Trump, operational control of the border is becoming a reality, and the administration's historic enforcement measures are yielding huge results. Illegal aliens are finally getting the blunt message. If you cross the border illegally, you will be swiftly deported and never return to the United States of America. Efforts to arrest the criminal illegal alien invaders are continuing to ramp up. ICE Chicago arrested a Mexican national convicted of predatory sexual assault of a child in Cook County, Illinois. This week, ICE Denver arrested a Mexican national convicted of sexual assault of a child in Houston County, Texas. ICE Miami arrested a Nicaraguan convicted of aggravated battery in Hillsborough County, Florida. ICE Houston arrested a Salvadorian national convicted of attempted sexual assault of a child and escape in Dallas County, Texas. And ICE Chicago arrested a Mexican national convicted of aggravated sexual abuse of a minor in Illinois. Despite the Democrats' insane objections, President Trump will continue to embolden law enforcement officers to arrest dangerous legal alien criminals and keep our communities safe.
That's a big deal, right? So again, forgive me, it was catch and release. I think we're still at like 90% decline in the actual border, 96% decline in the actual border crossings. But when you have a catch and release and you were just releasing them, right? And that's down 99.9%. It shows you that ICE is now able to do its job. And by doing its job, it's able to help keep us safe, which is exactly what people wanted, which is why the polling shows that the Democrats are just on the wrong side of the issue. I want to get to some news in the markets right now. We've got a stock market that's higher today, rebounding a bit after some of the volatility that we saw in yesterday's session. And this is in part because there's some sort of sense of relief, if you would, a de-escalation, apparently, according to one Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, about this U.S.-China tariff fight. He said, Bessent did, that he expects there will be a de-escalation in President Donald Trump's trade war with China in the very near future. He called the sky-high tariff fight, or forgive me, he called the sky-high tariff fight, now I'm reading actually from CNBC right now, between Washington and Beijing unsustainable. So that's really interesting. He did this actually at a conference that JP Morgan was hosting. They have this conference going on as the World Bank has its meetings going on. The World Bank coming out with a much lower estimate on what U.S. growth would be, but I would only caution that the World Bank is always wrong in their estimates of GDP growth, and they knocked a whole percentage point off of it because of the tariffs. I would just say that perhaps the World Bank is missing something, and hopefully Scott Bessent was able to sort of communicate between the lines here. Let me read to you what he said. There was a closed door meeting Tuesday, and basically he said, you know what? Quote, there will be a de-escalation regarding that trade war with China in, quote, the very near future. So this is what made its way out into the stock market, and that's why you see some upside right now. Of course, we had the futures market higher as well. No one, quote, thinks the current status quo is sustainable. So Bessent, who is really seen as the architect of everything right now, he's really steering the ship. He's the captain of the ship in terms of the tariff plan. Right now, Peter Navarro's kind of been moved to the side. You've got him saying, basically, that there's going to be a solution in the near future. And so, of course, you have stocks reacting very positively to that because they want to make sure that this tariff war really gets managed in a way that is positive. Later today, actually, just a short time ago, Caroline Leavitt sort of echoed what Bessent was saying with this positive outlook in terms of talks with China. And she said that basically negotiations have begun and that we're doing very well, quote, in respect to a potential trade deal with China. And that, quote, Trump is setting the stage for a deal with China and the ball is moving in the right direction. Okay, good. Okay, so, I hope you bought when the market was down. If you can stomach that kind of volatility, this is very, very good news to see. And so, again, this getting reported in the financial media, which is having an effect on things. Let me see if I can bring you over to a chart of the day here as we try and sort of make sense of all of this. You can see stocks rally as investors hope for a de-escalation in the trade war. That's the sort of focus right now as people try and figure out where this is all heading, right? Where all this is heading. Stocks rally as investors hope for a de-escalation in the trade war. And you see that the S&P and the NASDAQ and the Dow are all trading higher as a result of this. This is the good news that people were hoping for. And this is kind of hopefully taking a little bit away from some of the concerns about the Fed chief, though that's still out there. And you can see here in the Wall Street Journal that there are still concerns about the Fed chief. In fact, the president may try to pin some of the potential downturn on none other than one Jerome Powell. Here's the story right here. Trump is laying the groundwork to blame Powell for any downturn. That wouldn't be surprising to me. There's been a lot of negativity out there, though. Dow headed for the worst April since 1932 as investors said they had no confidence in this administration. Well, I would just say, you know what? You guys better rethink that one. I think you might want to revisit your confidence check. What have we been telling you at 76 Research all along? We've been telling you, you know what? Stay the course. Don't let emotion cloud your judgment. I know it's scary, right? I know it's scary, and this is actually why I have gold in my portfolio, because it helps me sleep at night. And gold's been killing it, by the way. You also want to take this opportunity to find great companies, and there are a lot of them out there that are going to be able to weather this storm. Go to 76research.com for more on that. Use code word dollar so you can sign up for the 76 report, or go to 76 portfolios and learn more about our actual stocks that we have in each of our portfolios. I also would encourage you to go to trishlovesgold.com because Trish definitely loves gold right now. I mean, like, I've never loved gold so much as I love gold right now. But I don't think it's ever been this high. We are at an all-time high, ladies and gentlemen. We just touched another intraday high on gold today, and Goldman Sachs says, you know what, we're going to 4,000. You get UBS with a price target of something like around 3,600 by year end. I'm telling you, we're there already, almost, right? 3,500, I believe, that we touched today. So Trish definitely loves gold right about now. But I tend to buy it when it has any kind of down. I also like gold miners, incidentally, but these are our wonderful, wonderful, wonderful sponsors here on the Trish Regan Show. So we like to show them some love, especially when they're making us money, especially when you get up to $15,000 in free silver right now. Text Trish to 65532 right now, 65532, or call them at 1-844-495-1115. So Marco Rubio is getting very busy. Marco Rubio is going nuclear on the State Department. You know, it was bound to happen sooner or later. He's got a little distraction over there with Pete right now. I guess he's figuring this might be the time. 700 jobs being cut in Washington, D.C. as we speak. This news just coming out today, unveiling the very first stage of his plan to make massive cuts there at the State Department. The idea being, let's put a little bit of, how shall we say, a little bit of doge into the State Department, right? Like, let's look at this thing and roll up our sleeves and see where the waste is. And he's found a whole lot of waste. Take a look here. Some 700 jobs he is cutting in none other than Washington, D.C., and he's eliminating 132 domestic offices, cutting around 700 positions, as I said, in Washington, D.C., and closing offices that are focused on war crimes and global conflict. This is according to State Department officials and documents obtained by CNN. I should confirm that the story is also being reported out in the New York Times, and Marco Rubio himself just put this forward, confirming it all. He said, we are facing tremendous challenges across the globe. To deliver on President Trump's America First foreign policy agenda, we must make the State Department great again. Nice one, Marco. In its current form, the department is bloated, bureaucratic, and unable to perform its essential diplomatic mission in this new era of great power competition. Over the past 15 years, the department's footprint has had unprecedented growth and costs have soared. But far from seeing a return on investment, taxpayers have seen less effective and efficient diplomacy. The sprawling bureaucracy created a system more beholden to radical political ideology than advancing America's core national interest, which is why today I'm announcing a comprehensive reorg plan. They're reorganizing at the State Department. Imagine that will bring the department into the 21st century. This approach will empower the Oops, definitely not. The Republicans, hopefully. Actually, just what's fair. That's all I care. It doesn't even have to be partisan. We'll empower the department from the ground up, from the bureaus to the embassies. Region-specific functions will be consolidated to increase functionality. Redundant offices are going to be removed, and non-statutory programs that are misaligned with America's core national interests will cease to exist. Under President Trump's leadership, we have a commander-in-chief committed to putting America and America's first. As his Secretary of State, I am confident a reformed State Department will meet the moment and help make our country great again. Now, before anybody freaks out, this is what happens. When you have a new CEO that comes into a company or a new manager, right, what do they typically do? They look around. They see how they can make it better, leaner, meaner, faster, more efficient, better. I go back to better. Wasn't that Melania's campaign? Be better or be best? I mean, come on, right? Like, we need these departments to be nimble and agile and successful on the world stage. So the thinking here is we've gotten too darn big. We've gotten too darn bloated. It's like, GE. Remember General Electric? I mean, it used to be the bomb, and then they realized, this is maybe just a little too big. And it struggled. Hey, it could be like Comcast. Comcast is like, we don't really need MSNBC anymore. MSNBC is actually dragging us down. Rachel Maddow and co. Morning Joe, you are dragging us down over at Comcast. You're hurting our earnings. So guess what? We're going to spin you off into SpinCo. This is how the world works. Unfortunately, it's not how government works. I mean, government has never worked this way. The thinking is, if the economy grows, we need to add. And if the economy doesn't grow, we still need to add. I had this argument once with the guy who was running the National Economic Council for Obama on live television. You weren't supposed to argue on Bloomberg, but leave it to me. Gene Sperling. And I'm like, well, why does spending as a percentage of GDP have to keep increasing? And he's like, but of course it does. Like, what a stupid question. Why would you ask me that? I'm like, well, think about it. If you're a family and you get a pay raise, do you run out and buy a new house or a new car, or suddenly, go to fancier restaurants? No, hopefully you're pocketing or saving that money. It's not like just because you have more money to spend, you do. Why does government think the more you have, the more you must spend? When you look at these spending levels, guys, they are the worst they've ever been. We are spending more than any other time. I mean, unless you're at war. Unless you're at war. So what has the State Department become? Kudos to Marco Rubio for taking this one on. He's doing quite a job there. I'm sure they're going to be coming after him too, just like they came after Pete. Wait for that, right? Wait for that. It is wonderful to have you all here. I want to thank you again. Make sure you subscribe to the show. Make sure you share, like. Let me know your thoughts. Is Marco doing the right thing? Yay, nay, yes, right? Make sure you like, share, and we'll be back here live again around this time. I think it works, right? Tomorrow.